Okay, I've just initiated the Windows snipping tool. What you're seeing before you right now is Spica, Alpha Virginis, through the 150 ED refractor tonight. So we're operating at F8. Right now we're operating at roughly 125 to 150 X. The sky is rife with high thin clouds. The weather has not been particularly good. We are generating lots of local weather here with the mountains to the west, the Cascades, in fact. What we're going to do tonight, however, is we're going to approximate to 9-inch settings. That means we're going to look for 12th magnitude galaxies that are 2 by 2 arc minutes roughly, and that'll give us a sense. Whatever the settings will give us a sense of our baseline for views, and then we're going to go touring around and seeing what we can do in terms of pushing the exposure times and playing with the settings for the distribution of light using the settings. All right, so on the histogram. So what we will do is, the sky is still quite bright. As I said, it's about 9:17 now. It probably won't get dark till 9:45, and I will then come out, see if I can set up some focus on some faint stars, and we will begin a tour. Right now I'm going to determine what is culminating to the south, having synchronized the scope to Spica using an earlier model from about almost a month ago. All right, so hang in there. Let us begin. What you're seeing here is NGC 5507. It's right on the limit. And there's an Egeon galaxy, I believe it's 5506, but let's just focus on 5507. Okay, let's first confirm the zoom. So we're operating at 32% zoom using the 6-inch refractor this evening at 150 millimeter f8. And I know at this particular magnification or zoom, the full moon takes up to about there, all the way around the screen. So it's roughly about 60x. So if we're at, once again, 30%, we double it to 60%. We're now operating at about 120x. We're getting a little better view of the galaxy right there. What we want to do is we want to sample the sky conditions. We're at NGC 5507, galaxy in Virgo, magnitude 12.5, 1.6 by 0.9 arc minutes, which basically puts this somewhere around an average surface brightness of 12.8, maybe. I'll have to calculate it in the morning, which should be seen with aversion through a 6-inch scope at the eyepiece. That's basically what my baseline is for the time being. We're holding it direct, so we're going to drop back the exposure time to half this and see if we can still see it, because I've already determined, I have to stop it first, don't I? All right, I have already determined that 0.25 exposure time is roughly the 0.2, we'll call it, is roughly the exposure time of the scope aperture. So we're operating at roughly 150 millimeters right now. Notice we're not really picking up either of the galaxies at 0.2 seconds exposure time. I haven't played with the histogram yet. It looks pretty good. All right, so we're kind of like not quite really defining this galaxy. So as I said before, it should just barely be detectable. So let's assume tonight we are operating at 0.2 seconds, is barely giving us a view. And if we could do an inversion, sometimes you can do it on the screen. But let's first go ahead and play with our histograms to see if we can't improve the view a little bit of this galaxy by. All right. Okay, we've eliminated too much light with a histogram. Too much light. Keep sliding it to the left now. Too far to the left. All right, so this is probably about the best settings we're going to get. We are not quite seeing the galaxy where we expected to see it. We'll call this a baseline, 12.5. Let's just say at 0.2 seconds, we're operating at 150 millimeters. So that's our starting point. We've now gone to 0.5 seconds exposure time, and we'll push it up, and we are just barely making out the galaxy here. So let's assume on this particular night of seeing, it takes 0.5 seconds of exposure in order to be able to clearly and on direct vision reveal the galaxy NGC 5507, which I will now tell you the specific data on once again, because we are trying to characterize the seeing conditions by using set points. Oops, somehow I ended up getting an I here. Give me a moment here and I'll give you the data. What we're seeing now is NGC 5507, and I'll give you the data on it. 12.5 magnitude galaxy, 1.6 by 0.9 arc seconds, a spiral with a bar of the lenticular class, 88 million light years distant. It's probably about 40,000 light years in diameter. Light ascension 14 hours, 13 minutes, 19 seconds, with a declination but slightly below the celestial equator of -3 degrees, 8 minutes, 56 seconds. It is not quite culminating. I would say it's about 10 degrees off from culmination. The galaxy, I believe, is right up one of these two galaxies here. There is an edge on somewhere also on the screen, but we'll not focus on that at this time. And we will move on, and we're going to assume we're getting 6-inch views at 0.5 seconds on a marginal night of seeing transparency due to high thin clouds. The sky does have a bluish cast to it at this point, and it is now 9:50 in the evening. So now we've doubled the exposure time. Basically, if we assume that the last exposure time was 6 seconds, was the equivalent of a 6-inch scope, even though it was 0.5 seconds under marginal seeing conditions, and we're now to a 1-second exposure. The galaxy is clearly present on the screen, and you can see the longer edge-on galaxy hinted at over here on the screen. So let's just say now we're operating at basically a 9-inch aperture exposure time. We're going to go ahead and continue to double it through until we start not tracking stars very well. Now I can't actually dial in the exposure time. I have to accept the menu options. So we're going to go to 2 seconds right now. All right, we've leaped to 2 seconds, which means 4 times as much light gathering as we did when we started at 0.5, which we assumed under these sky conditions was basically a 6-inch scope. And look what we're getting now. Clearly, we are getting a galactic core with an aura around it, and we have this large edge-on galaxy nearby. These are very good views. Now, we have to assume this is like a 12-inch view, even though under good skies, I could get this view easily at 1 second exposure. We're operating tonight at 2 seconds. So continuing through our little experiment here. As I mentioned, this is NGC 5506. It was a face-on lenticular galaxy, smaller, 2-to-1 aspect ratio, but here we have this edge-on galaxy, which was its neighbor. This looks like about 7 to 8 arc minutes in difference. NGC 5506, I'm pointing out here, is also a galaxy in Virgo, magnitude 11.9, 2.7 by 0.8 arc minutes, which means it should roughly have about a 12.5 averaged brightness between its average surface brightness and total brightness, which is what I use to determine what a 12.5 being an averted view of a galaxy through a 6-inch scope. Here we're seeing the core with extensions that are quite large, very obvious core. This is a spiral of class A with some peculiarities to it. So it's one step removed from a lenticular, but it's been disturbed somehow, probably gravitationally by its neighbor 5507. That has to be confirmed. It confirmed it by it also being 88 million light years distant. It's at right ascension 14 hours, 13 minutes, 14 seconds, and also a -3, 12 minutes, 27 seconds declination. Now, we are now operating at 5-second exposure, which we are assuming is roughly, we had 0.5 for a 6, we had 2 for a 12. We basically roughly doubled it, so we're now up to about an 18-inch scope. and we just had some kind of a meteor passage or a satellite. So once again, 18-inch scope view. Now what you might like to notice, we're at 10-second exposure time. So now we've gone to about a 24-inch view of the sky. I did play with the histogram settings a little bit to improve the quality of the view. But the key here is we're now operating at much less magnification. Let's push it up to 50%. We are getting more extension on this on NGC 5506, and we are getting a much brighter view of the core and aura around face on 2-to-1 aspect ratio lenticular 5507. So we are actually seeing more and more of the view. Notice the edge-on does not seem to have a bar. It's got a stellar-like core without much of a core region, and then you see the spiral arms going off. We're going to assume at 10 seconds exposure under these conditions, we're roughly getting the view of a 24-inch scope. And I have viewed the night sky through a 22. And this, I have to look at 50. We barely were able to see 15.5 magnitude scopes under some extraordinary seeing conditions. 15.5 magnitude through a 22-inch scope under extraordinary seeing conditions at some 8,000 feet in altitude. So this is actually quite a good view, except the background sky is quite bright. We'll leave it at that for the time being. Now we're going to go to 30-inch settings, which will roughly be the equivalent, 30 inches, of going to a 48 minus probably a 30. See, we're going to be tripling it. If we doubled it, we'd be going from 24 to 36. So let's call it something around a 40-inch equivalent eyepiece aperture scope. Instantly, with the 30-inch, the 30-second view, roughly a 40-inch scope, I really had to play with the histogram. We were getting a lot of background light. The other thing to notice here is we're getting a pretty sharp view, but only at the 30% zoom. And if I go to 50% zoom, we're really not improving the view that much. But one of the reasons maybe, and I'm going to adjust the histogram a little bit, is it takes a long time to get several 30-second exposures. Now, I would like to point this out. We have this nice edge-on galaxy here. We have the brighter one here, the more or less face-on lenticular. But we're also starting to pick up some fainter galaxies, and these are probably not NGCs at all. Notice also, because we're using the Losman D mount, we're not getting doubling of stars like we did on the EQ6R Skywatcher mount, which is basically about half the price. So this scope is tracking seriously better. So let's assume we're getting the equivalent of about a 40-inch view at this point. The focus could be slightly off because I set the focus at a lower zoomage. But here we have what we might consider an eyepiece view through a 48-inch scope. Keep in mind that when you look at digital sky survey images, that's through a 48-inch scope. And notice we just had a drop in the background brightness because we made another pass. That's done using photographic plates, and we have no idea how long those exposures were. I would have to do some research. So here we are. We're going to stay with 30-second exposures for the evening, and we're going to go after some real fainties to get a sense of how deep we can go using 30-second exposures. Well, I may have initiated image capture a little soon because we got some streaks across there, and they're probably associated with stars. I doubt they're satellites or meteors, but possibly. Now, notice this is NGC 5509. It's a galaxy in Boötes. Further north, 20 degrees, 23 minutes, and 13 seconds, with a right ascension of 141239. This is a lenticular spiral. Now, it says here on the handset that it's magnitude 15.1. We have several galaxies in the field. That 15.1, however, could be the blue-violet. And given the fact that it's a lenticular spiral, it could actually be a 14th magnitude galaxy. I will not know that until I go on the Sky Live on the Manana to determine whether or not we're actually getting the blue violet or visual magnitude. So we're going to leave off on this one for the time being. All right, our next galaxy is actually going to have two on the field, and I can't tell which is which. There's going to be an NGC 5511b, which is 15th magnitude, and an A, which is 15th magnitude, and an NGC 5511b. Both galaxies are in Boötes. B is 15.5 magnitude and very small, so it should have a fairly high surface brightness. It's a spiral with peculiarities, 328 million light years distance, so it's not very large, maybe 35,000 light years in diameter. 0.4 by 0.2 arc minutes, 2-to-1 aspect ratio. This, however, looks like it has more of the 2-to-1 aspect ratio. It could very well be the galaxy, but then I'm not seeing A anywhere else on the field, which is slightly brighter and probably larger. This galaxy is at right ascension 14 hours, 13 minutes, 5 seconds, with a declination of plus 8 degrees, 37 minutes, and 56 seconds. Once again, that 15.5 could be the blue-violet magnitude. Folks, I'm a little disappointed now. We are still operating at 30 seconds exposure. This is NGC 5701. It's a galaxy in Virgo. Magnitude 10.9. 4.7 by 4.6 arc minutes, so it's roughly got about a 14th magnitude average surface brightness. Spiral with a bar, lenticular class A, so it's half time removed, and it should have a ring. And you know what? No matter what I do to this galaxy, I cannot really improve its presentation. Now, what I might try to do is go back to 10-second exposure times. But I'm playing with the histogram right now, trying to bring out, well, there is a hint of an annularity right around that, but it doesn't look quite as large as we'd expect. So I'm going to run the right histogram setting way over to the right. You see how it darkens the background sky. It doesn't bring anything out. And I'm going to push it to the left, and we're going to get too bright of a view. Once again, we're at 50% E-zoom. And that is not a particularly good view of a 10.9 magnitude galaxy. However, let's have a look at it with a 10-second exposure, because you do run up against a limit in the night sky if the seeing does not support it. You're wasting aperture if the sky conditions are not supportive of that aperture. What I just said is apparently not true in this case. This is the same galaxy here, much smaller, NGC 5701 in presentation, even though we're at 100% E zoom. Now, looking at the screen at an angle, you can still see that it has a certain circularity to it that's suggestive of an annularity in terms of the spiral arms twisting around and kissing each other, reaching out to each other. However, we did not get the similar view that we got at 10 seconds exposure time, even though we are getting far more stacks. Now, I've had to really push the magnification up to be able to make any real progress with this. We'll go back to 50%. That's our standard for the evening. We are not seeing as much of this face-on magnitude 10.9 galaxy as we were under 30-second exposures. Here's another experiment. We're now at a 60-second exposure time. Notice how the stars are getting doubled now, but that was the first single pass. What I'm hoping for is on the second path it'll use its triangulation stacking algorithms to create single stars. We just completed, it cannot find matched triangles, which means it's not able to do a good overlay. So 60-second exposure times on the Losman D without an off-axis guider does not provide us with the views that we may want. But this galaxy certainly has gotten much brighter, although it is distended, so we cannot use 60-second exposure times at all due to the fact that the mount isn't able to natively track with enough competency.